Welcome to Global BC Presents. I'm Sophie Lui. Pop culture is all around us. The Kardashians, the memes, TikTok, Twitter, and TMZ. Some people try to avoid it, but Vancouver writer Jen Sookfong Lee has embraced it since she was a little girl, and it's the basis of her new memoir, Superfan: How Pop Culture Broke My Heart. From Bob Ross to Rihanna to Anne of Green Gables, they've all played a part in her life's pivotal moments. We had lunch here in Chinatown and talked about her new book.
So I did think, and I wrote this to you, that it might be slightly cliche or very cliche for a Chinese Canadian journalist to interview a Chinese Canadian author in Chinatown at a Chinese restaurant.
Yeah.
But I also thought, and it is totally cliche, but I also thought like part of your identity, and I think part of mine, and I could be wrong, is in the conflict between being Chinese and also trying to escape Chineseness, and and the relationship you've had with pop culture and how that has sort of driven that feeling. Am I sort of right?
Yeah, I think that in the book, a lot of what drives me into loving pop culture is that the pop culture didn't look like me or you at all. And it felt like a bit of an escape from Chineseness in a way, because, when you walk through the world, people only really see me as an Asian woman. I can't take the face off and pretend to be somebody else. And I think when I was growing up, that felt really overwhelming. I think now that we're here in this restaurant, which I love, and we're talking to each other, it feels just like, what's the point in even trying to escape it anymore? I mean, you get to a point in your life where you have to kind of be okay with who you are. And then I'm like, great, we've got barbecue pork. It's all good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got the best food.
We got the best food.
There were times when I even felt in my life like I forget that I'm Chinese sometimes. Like other people pointed out to me, and then I remember. You actually pointed out in your book that you used to get mistaken, or people would say, you look like that newscaster.
It was you. They were. This has been happening ever since you've been on television, Sophie. People are like, "Oh, you look just like Sophie," and I'm like, "Do I? I don't think so." We might have had the same haircut for like 5 minutes.
Right, like 20 years ago when we first met, or something like that. So, okay, I loved your book, and I related to so much of it that I wanted to interview you, not just so that viewers could find out more about it, but also because I haven't related to a book that way in a very long time.
That's so nice to hear.
So you primarily write fiction, though. Why dive into the memoir space? It seems like a kind of a scary world to open yourself up.
It was so scary. I'm scared even now. Like when I'm promoting the book, it scares me. It scared me in so many ways, but I felt like there was something I really wanted to say about my relationship to majority culture just in general, because it's been, the last couple of years have been really amazing for movies or television or all sorts of media featuring Asian people and Asian creators, which has been awesome. But for so much of my life, there was zero. Unless you were watching movies from Asia, there was really almost nothing. And I really wanted to explain why I cared so much about, Growing Pains or Bob Ross or whatever. Why did I care if it wasn't reflecting myself to myself, basically? And I thought, no, but there's a book there. And then when I started writing it, I actually didn't think it was going to be this much memoir. I thought mostly I was just going to talk about pop culture stuff.
Right.
And then as I was writing it, I'm like, oh no, I have to write more about myself and my feelings. I don't know if I'm comfortable with that. But yeah, it was extremely scary. But I'm actually really glad I did it at the end of the day, because...
Thank you. Thank you.
Hearing from you and hearing from particularly Asian women that they felt so much connection with this book is actually really important for me, because that's who I wrote it for. And, because very rarely have people been writing stuff for us anyway.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, so Amy Tan, you mentioned Amy Tan and Joylet Club in your book, which I feel like every Asian in North America, or Asian woman in North America of a certain age would have read.
Yeah.
And you called it, I've got to find the exact quote, the modern template for North American Chinese society. That was how you described the book.
Yeah.
It's a great book.
It is a great book.
Yeah, but it was sort of like what was expected of us, or this ideal of who we were.
Yeah, and like it was because it's about mothers and daughters in particular. Like, and my mom has 5 daughters, and we have no brothers. It felt like so much pressure.
I was raised the Chinese way.
Like I had to live a life where, you know, there's conflict with your mom, but at the end of the day, you come back together and everything's really nice and you've resolved all your conflicts. No, I am still in conflict with my mother. Like every day is a conflict with my mother. And I felt like this is what the story, for me as a writer, that was the story people wanted me to write. Right. And that felt really confining. And I just, you know, there was a point where I was like, I am never going to write an intergenerational mother-daughter situation ever again. I haven't done it since, or maybe am I writing it now? Maybe I'm still writing it in different ways. I don't know.
I found with that book that somehow I convinced myself that that was my life.
Did you?
Even though it absolutely wasn't.
Which character were you?
Like all of them. I was just all of them somehow. Like I just thought, oh, you know, there's something so much deeper, and this is what my family is. But it really is not at all.
No.
It's not at all.
No.
I mean, it's someone's, I'm sure. It's hers, maybe. But yeah, I guess that's like that was sort of the more comfortable vision of the Chinese immigrant to North America.
I think and a really comfortable vision of what Chinese women are, specifically. Because I think that in that book, it's a very domestic interior book, and that is not a criticism because that's the book that Amy Tan wrote. But it is a very, like, the women do certain things. They have certain jobs. They play piano. They act and behave a certain way. And I felt like, you know, when I was 19 and I had, like, pink spiky hair and weird piercings, I definitely was nothing like any of these women. And that felt, then why should I try, right? Yeah.
So who were the pop culture heroes or people that you grew up with who you did relate to?
Oh my gosh, I don't know. Courtney Love.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Ooh, yeah, I really did enjoy Courtney Love. I loved all of that. I loved the Beastie Boys too, and I really loved. Oh my God, Parker Posey in all of her movies. These were when I'm about 18, 19, 20 years old.
Yeah.
And I desperately wished I'd been in the movie Swingers. I wasn't. I tried to learn how to swing dance terribly. Yeah.
But then again, all of those people, they're all white people.
They're all white people.
Yeah.
That's all we had, really.
Yeah. It is definitely very different now. So it seemed at certain points in your book, did you compare your family with like the Kardashians, Anna Green Gables of the world? And
yeah, of course. And then we were always never like them.
Yeah.
But in some ways we were. I mean, like when my dad died when I was young, that point of connection with Anna Green Gables was really important and informative for me. But I think that as I got older, these visions of families that I was seeing in media was never really what my family was quite complicated. There's a lot of us. There were a lot of things that happened when we were young. Yeah. And like, you know, I was always looking for my family in media, and I never found it.
It seemed like the shows and the characters and the singers and actors that you looked up to in pop culture helped you, I guess, fit in.
Yeah.
But also reminded you that you didn't.
Yeah, exactly. So like you'd use those things to try to fit in because you're using them as like points of discussion when you're, you know, first meeting somebody or whatever. Or, you know, if you're somebody who, you know, in the 90s used to go to raves, for example, and you go thinking, I've got the right outfit, I've got everything right, I've got the glow sticks and everything. And then you get there and you're the only Asian face in like a room full of 200 sweaty dancing people. Yeah. And then you realize, actually, I don't fit in, right? And then you realize, you know, when you're with your other girlfriends who look differently from you, and the boys talk to them instead, and they kind of leave you out of it. And it's not because you're less attractive, it's not because you're less interesting, it's because they almost don't know what to do with you. And I think the hierarchy of like sort of attractiveness, it doesn't even occur. Yeah. At least back then, it didn't occur to them to even talk to me.
I might have been the only other Chinese person at that rave.
Yeah. Did I see it? I was like, one day, someone's going to tell me we look alike.
Okay. You talked about Anna Green Gables and how that helped you when your father was very sick and when he passed away. Bob Ross also figured prominently in your life. How does Bob Ross get into the story?
When my dad was sick and then when he was dying, my sister and I watched a lot of The Joy of Painting. It was on every Saturday on PBS, and we'd sit there and just watch it. And you know, like Bob Ross has that really soothing voice, and we would almost be lulled into this like half sleep.
We don't make mistakes. We have happy accidents.
There was something about that sort of comforting, continual, paternal, it was almost a paternal presence he had for us. And it was such a comfort because at that point, my dad was not, after he had died, obviously he wasn't around, but even when he was sick, he was not very present. And I think we needed to be reminded that, because you know what Bob Ross always says, like, you're in charge of this world. There are no mistakes, just happy little accidents. And I'm like, okay, Bob Ross thinks everything's going to be okay. Therefore, we're going to be okay. And my dad was like a pretty encouraging, positive person. So I needed to hear that again. So I was watching Bob Ross in an attempt, I think, to remember my dad and be comforted by my dad.
So what happens now whenever you see Bob Ross?
I kind of half fall asleep in the most lovely, cloud, comforting way. I love Bob Ross. I still love Bob Ross. The words don't matter. What matters is that I am not someone who's Chinese or Canadian. I'm not split down the middle within my body. I am one whole person, and that's what my identity is. I'm Jen, and this is who I am.
Tony Parsons makes an appearance in your book.
Yeah, he does. Oh my gosh, I totally didn't remember that till just a second.
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
He does. Just in that he was anchoring the newscast when the Tiananmen Square massacre happened.
That's right.
And you talked about, so this is sort of, I guess, a different area of pop culture. It's mass media and, you know, how news can inform how we see the world. This is another part of the book that I really related to, because how kids treated you at school or how they discussed the Tiananmen Square massacre and the influx of immigrants from Hong Kong and China. Tell me a little bit about that.
I went to an alternative school, and I don't know if anyone knows this, but Chinese parents typically do not send their children to alternative public schools. Yeah. And it was a school that's very focused on like arts and like social activism, which I loved. Both things that I really liked and really thrived in. But I was, for a time, the only Asian person in that school of 100 students. And so at some point, you know, the teachers would open up discussions about social issues, which was very par for the course for the school. And at some point, they started talking about the McMansions that supposedly immigrants from Hong Kong and Taiwan were building all over Vancouver. And these kids were just complaining about these newer immigrants, and they would always say, oh, we don't mean Chinese people like you, Jen.
Yeah.
Right. And you know what they mean, because I don't have an accent, and because, you know, my parents have been here for a long time, and, you know, that kind of stuff. And at that age, I didn't know whether I should feel grateful that they were giving me this, like, pass to white adjacency, or if I should be angry. And it was a really confusing, and this is the war that goes on, I think, within a lot of Chinese Canadians. Should we be grateful for the privilege that we have, or should we also be questioning it and be more angry? And this is something I think that happens to a lot of people. So that stuff was, yeah, I wrote about that. And then also you're asked to explain, like, to people who don't know Chinese culture much. I'm always asked to explain things to people. And I'm like, just, you know, and now I can just say, just Google it. But back then you couldn't.
No. And then if I don't have an answer for them, then I feel like I'm not a good Chinese person either.
And you think they're judging you, like, why don't you know this, right? Like, why don't you speak Mandarin? I don't know. Why don't you?
Yeah. I mean, and you talk about that a few times throughout the book too. That kind of the dual identities. I'm Chinese or I'm Canadian. I'm never the same. I'm never the both of those things at the same time. But you seem to come to terms with that as you got older.
Yeah. I think that, like, there were never any words that were sufficient to describe what my identity was or how I wanted my identity to be. But when I got older, I said, forget the words. I remember this very clearly. I must have been somewhere in my 20s or 30s, and the words don't matter. What matters is that I am not someone who's Chinese or Canadian. I'm not split down the middle within my body. I am one whole person, and that's what my identity is. I'm Jen, and this is who I am.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter. I stopped apologizing for not doing things the way people would like. Either you're not Chinese enough or you're not Canadian enough. Well, so what?
there was a part of your book, and it's split up into is it 10 different essays basically, and they each sort of have a different tone to them. I found, but one that really got me and it felt very raw was when you talk about Asian fetish.
Oh yeah.
And I could almost feel your emotion as you were writing that. The Atlanta spa shootings is what it focused on, and I remember when the shootings happened, or when I first heard about them, when I was about to anchor the 5 o'clock news, and I saw, oh my God,
Oh no.
there's been a mass shooting at a spa. At a spa. That's all we knew at that time, and I thought,
It's Asian women.
Asian women.
Of course, yeah.
It's Asian women. How did you feel? Where what was the?
Well, my stomach dropped because as soon as, and I think that's the first news that we got. I didn't know if they were Asian women, but I knew. And it's that sense of the thing that you always knew would happen, actually happening, even though you wished it wouldn't. And that was the feeling I had of, oh no, oh now it's happening. And I felt quite sick. And I didn't know, we were a bit numb. I was a bit numb for a while. And it didn't really hit me until one of my best friends came over just unexpectedly, and she said, I heard the news and I brought you some cookies, your favorite cookies. I'm like, that's very sweet. Yeah. But it was just, the numbness was hard. And then I think afterwards when people were calling me to make comments about it in media, and like everyone called, like so many people called me. And I kept saying no, because I didn't want to cry on air. I didn't want to do any of those things. And also, what am I supposed to explain to you? Like, there's nothing to explain. Mm-hmm. But then when I was writing this essay, and initially, I'd started writing that essay long before
the shootings
happened. Long before the shootings occurred. And then I was talking to my editor. She said, do you want to talk about it? And I said, let me try. I said, I don't want to talk about it, but let me try. So then I did. And I think I'm glad I did, because all of those sort of roads of the experience of being fetishized for your race was leading to that one moment. And I felt like people will not understand the gravity of it if I don't write about Atlanta. And I dedicated the book to the ladies.
I saw that.
And sometimes at events I try to read that out. I cry every time.
So talk about Asian fetish, because I feel like the discussion hadn't really been had out in the open as much until that happened.
Yeah.
And then it seemed like this term that I think we all knew, or it had been, can't believe I'm going to say this on camera, but maybe we'd called yellow fever at a certain time. Mm-hmm. We knew about it. I don't know if the rest of the world really understood what it was.
Yeah, we'd whisper to each other about it.
But like bringing it back to pop culture, and that was depicted in pop culture, like who we are supposed to be.
Yes. In terms of a sexual relationship with somebody or intimate relationship with somebody, yeah.
Yeah, like an obedient, but also, sex kitten in the bedroom kind of thing, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Have we moved past that?
That's a great question, and I think that I'm aging out of it a little bit, and I wouldn't know at this point. But I don't. I think we're trying to move past it. I think people are more aware of it. But I think that if you ask younger women if that's true or untrue, I'm not sure. I've certainly heard. I have nieces who are 18 to 26 years old, and they've had experiences which I find upsetting, and I have not said to them, this is an example of Asian fetish, because I don't think it's my place to tell them, put words on whatever their experiences are, but I feel like they are. So I don't know if we're moving past it, or in fact, we have moved past it a little bit and then have started regressing again, which, during COVID, all sorts of terrible things occurred. Yeah.
And then again, during COVID, when the first news came out about a virus, Wuhan, a market, and you felt that sense of dread once again.
Yeah, same. I know what's going to happen. Someone's going to yell at me on the street. Someone's going to spray paint something in Chinatown. Someone's going to punch an elderly person in the face. I already knew. Yeah. Right? Your stomach drops. It's that same feeling. You already know it's going to happen. So I would really love to write another essay about messy celebrity divorces and what that says about the rest of us.
Okay, I'll bring it back to pop culture itself.
Sure.
And pop culture of today. Mm-hmm. So, back in the day, you were into various things, Anna Green Gables, my God, Rihanna,
Yeah.
Princess Di. These are the characters you wrote about in the book. I mean, characters, they're real life people, except for Anna Green Gables. But so who is it today? Who do you look at today and sort of you could potentially write another essay about?
Well, Rihanna always. I could write more essays about Rihanna. She's my favorite, and everything about her makes me very happy. I would say, gosh, like right now, I'm very interested in like what is happening with post-divorce narratives, like famous people after their divorce. And I wrote a little bit about it in Superfan, but like more so because back when I was writing about it, I was mostly focused on Gwyneth Paltrow.
Gwyneth, yeah.
Yeah, but like I'm really interested in like what's going to happen with like Tom Brady, what's going to happen with Giselle.
Tom Brady and Gisele Bündchen have officially filed and finalized their divorce after 13 years of marriage.
I'm like really interested in like how, Olivia Wilde and Jason Sudeikis, like this is really interesting to me. So I would really love to write another essay about like messy celebrity divorces and what that says about like the rest of us.
We often are not we, but some people, probably myself included, like it's like a guilty pleasure. Knowing about Olivia Wilde and Jason Sudeikis, knowing about Tom and Giselle. You embrace it.
Yeah.
Oh, why?
Yeah. Well, because I think it says a lot about what we're preoccupied with. It says a lot about our relationships with the world. And I think my main thing is if we asked ourselves more questions about why we love something or hate something in pop culture, we'd probably be better off because we'd understand ourselves and like other people better. So I always think the more we interrogate stuff, the better off we are.
If there had been more Asian influences in pop culture in the 80s and 90s when we were growing up, do you think that would have made you a different person?
That's a great. I think so, and I say this because, like, my son is almost 13, and he has seen so much more Asian content in his lifetime than I ever did in my whole like 46 years of existence. And he never really feels unseen. Do you know? Like I remember we were watching Turning Red, the Disney film, and there was a lot of talk about like female puberty, which he was a little squidged out by, which fine. There's a scene near the end where all the aunties come to help save the girl. Yeah. And they get really angry. They become giant red pandas. And he started laughing. He's like, ha, ha, ha. My aunties would totally do that because I have like 4 sisters. And I'm like, you know what? They really would. And I love that he could do that. Like, and that's something that never happened to me. Like, never, ever, ever. So I think it would be different because he walks through the world very well adjusted. It's very strange. Like, and I was always like, I got to make myself smaller. I have to make myself invisible. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I misbehave? Then something terrible is going to happen to me. He has none of that. So I think maybe it would change a lot of things.
And what's the reaction been to your book? I mean, clearly I loved it, but.
It's been much bigger than I ever thought or dreamed of or imagined. I think that it's so weird to have like, I've written like 10, 11 books. It's very strange for me to have a book about myself go big. I was very used to writing novels and they did fine, like respectably and whatever. But for me to write about myself and have people talk about me in like in Goodreads reviews is really strange. Like, it's good, but it's also like really overwhelming. I have to talk about myself a lot, which is like, I don't like myself that much. Like, you know.
Well, I like talking to you.
Oh, thank you.